West Point cadets are fascinating. They are a lot of fun. They were the best part, I think, hands down. The two best parts about teaching at West Point were the history department and their incredible leadership and faculty, and then the cadets themselves, because the cadets are hilarious and funny and smart and surprising in many ways, including but they're also college kids, and so they will also say things that make you go, wait, what? that's not accurate in the least. But you get to have conversations there that you might not have in any other classroom, because those individuals have signed up to join this crazy thing that we call the United States Army, and have a really specific mission. And that's kind of have a heavy thing when you address it in a history classroom, because we're talking about all the things that those people in that profession have been asked to do, up to and including giving and taking life, which is, it's a really, that's a really fun thing to talk about at 7:40 in the morning.
Welcome to Leaders Recon. I'm Sergeant First Class Aaron Heft. Today we're here with Captain Jonathan Bratton of the Maine Army National Guard to talk about his time with the Talent Development Program and instructing at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Captain Bratton, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with teaching at West Point?
Absolutely, and thanks so much for having me here. It's a real privilege to come on and also get to talk about this really incredible experience. So background, a little weird. A lot of people ask, how do you end up being a historian as a guardsman? Which is something I'm sure you get asked all the time too. It's very untraditional, but a combination of being a giant history nerd and making the poor decision of getting 2 history degrees, so a bachelor's and a master's in history, and then also just being a very active guardsman, and being very active in the proponent of pushing history as a valuable lesson to our M-Day force, to our M-Day leaders. And so that was really sort of how I began to get involved in Guard history. I took up the position of command historian for the Maine National Guard in 2014 upon coming back from Afghanistan, and then just have been sort of living that dream ever since.
So how did you hear about an opportunity at West Point, and how did you get involved with the Talent Development Program?
Yeah, so by being a state historian, you are forced to sort of be a generalist. So the Maine National Guard, we've got a great history going back earlier than 1636 Massachusetts, despite what your records say, but also back to the colonial era. And so that means that Maine National Guard soldiers were present through colonial conflicts, revolution, all the way up through the Civil War and into World War I, World War II, and of course, global war on terror. With that work, I got heavily invested in our World War I history, following our Maine Guardsmen into France for World War I. Eventually, literally, when I went over in 2018 to be part of the Army's centennial commemorations for World War I. Because of that, I got to know a bunch of amazing people at the Army Center of Military History, got to make a bunch of really good connections. And it was there that I sort of entered myself, I guess, into the running unintentionally, to be sort of the guinea pig for this thing that CMH put together called the Scholar in Resident or Historian in Resident program, which is a one-year tour at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point to teach history, and then 1-year utilization tour at the Army Center of Military History. The intent being I'm able to go back and take everything that I got from USMA and from CMH, bring it back to my state and be more of a service to my adjutant general and our soldiers and airmen because of this program. And that's where the Talent Development Program comes in, because it's meant to do exactly that. So it was just sort of a perfect fit.
Wow, that's outstanding. So I think about West Point, and you think about the academy itself, and you don't generally associate it with the Guard, right?
So no, not so much. No.
So as an M-Day Guardsman, your background coming up in the state of Maine, doing all the things that a traditional Guardsman does, how did that prepare you for West Point, and what was teaching there like?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. definitely went in there with some preconceived notions, right? Like I definitely went in there thinking my background is going to be so totally different than all these active duty officers who are teaching here. What I was shocked to find was the reverse. I, in fact, had almost everything in common with my active duty peers, with the exception of sometimes I had more experience. So being a Guard soldier, so in my Guard career, I've done 2 DISCA activations, Hurricane Irene in Vermont in 2011, and then just last January for the DC mission. So 2 DISCA activations as a platoon leader and a company commander, 1 overseas tour, multiple in-state sort of, I don't know, all the things that we do sort of in-state for orders and different projects and missions like that, as well as similar company command times and tours, but with very different emphasis. I mean, as an M-Day Guard soldier, so as command historian, I'm a technician, and so I'm still an M-Day soldier. From the M-Day perspective as a commander or as a serving on a staff, serving on our engineer battalion staff when I was deployed, it's such a different perspective because you are always divided. I think every guardsman would understand that idea of, I do this with my unit and then I have all the rest of my life, and then somewhere in here there's family, I guess, and like a personal life, I'm not sure. So balancing that taught me, I think, really how to be focused as an instructor at West Point. And to be able to take on a lot of different projects there. So when I rolled in, I found, most of my instructors in my cohort, as we call it, of new instructors, we all had a similar background, as in most of us were in Afghanistan around the same time. We all kind of finished up company commands or were in command at the same time. So we were having similar experiences. And that was really cool, to be able to share that with and to give the Guard perspective, because I think a lot of them were a little bit shocked that, oh wow, the Guard does the same things as us. We could talk about CTC rotations or polk sucks. Like everyone knows polk sucks. And so because of the background as an engineer officer, both as a general engineer in general engineering and combat engineer stuff, working with the 86th IBCT out of Vermont, I was able to make those connections very easily and form excellent friendships that still exist. And then as to how did that apply to teaching, to instruction? So as a first year rotator or as a junior rotator, you are, well, West Point doesn't, like, the instructors don't have lieutenants around. So as a captain, you are a lieutenant. You are the junior person there, which is fine. Honestly, actually, like coming out of command and going into, where you are the head person and going into a place where you have zero authority whatsoever because you are not the superintendent, the commandant, or the dean, it was actually kind of nice. And so being able to take all my experiences from the Guard side and then bring it to the classroom, that was so cool. For most of the cadets, and I was teaching mostly for the fall semester, was all plebes, all freshmen, all brand new to this concept of what it means to be, in the Army. And then the second semester was sort of a mix of upperclassmen and lowerclassmen. But by and large, most of them didn't have a concept of what the National Guard did or was. One cadet made the unfortunate remark of talking about how it was sure great that the Army had the Guard in the reserve that hadn't deployed for the past 20 years. So if anything happened, and what's also is I sometimes was not the only Guard person in the classroom. Many of the cadets that were in there had been prior service Guard. So they could also speak up and be like, yeah, no, that's not how it is. Some of the deployment patches you see around are Guard soldiers. It's sort of one of those hidden secrets the Guard has of being able to get into West Point.
So for you as a Guard officer, it was a great developmental experience, but also in speaking with the cadets, you provided a totally different perspective from what they would have gotten from a traditional instructor at West Point? Yeah.
I mean, in one way, it was a little bit, I couldn't speak as much to sort of their promotion paths for their careers. Granted, most of them are looking at, graduation and commissioning and then 5 years because that's their service obligation. They're not as many of them looking past that. So that ended up not being too much of a problem. What I could speak to was the total force environment. So when we talk about all the compos, what all the compos do, how they relate to each other, and then especially how they play out in history. So teaching History 101, Army of the Republic, was a perfect opportunity to be like, all right, like day one, you got the militia. That's what you got. No one else has existed yet. All right, now June 14th happens in 1775, and all right, I guess there's an active duty now, and we can talk about them. But in serious note, it was really great to be able to convey Guard history alongside active component history to show that the two are nested together. They can't actually be separated. That this total force concept has been around for a really long time, and in fact, that's how we win wars. And then also there's that whole other aspect of, I'm giving the perspective of somebody who doesn't do this as their full-time job. Yes, I am in uniform as a technician, but I am not doing the Army thing 24/7. So being able to kind of provide a little bit of a perspective on what it's like to have sort of a different life. And also maybe, I don't know, remind them, hey, when you're looking at getting out in 5 years, I don't know, check out your state guard, something like that.
A little bit of a retention approach as well. Yeah, recruiting and retention.
That's right. I mean, West Point cadets are fascinating. They are a lot of fun. They were the best part, I think, hands down. The two best parts about teaching at West Point were the history department and their incredible leadership and faculty, and then the cadets themselves, because the cadets are hilarious and funny and smart and surprising in many ways, including but they're also college kids, and so they will also say things that make you go, wait, what? that's not accurate in the least. But you get to have conversations there that you might not have in any other classroom, because those individuals have signed up to join this crazy thing that we call the United States Army, and have a really specific mission. And that's kind of have a heavy thing when you address it in a history classroom, because we're talking about all the things that those people in that profession have been asked to do, up to and including giving and taking life, which is, it's a really, that's a really fun thing to talk about at 7:40 in the morning. But it was great to see how cadets latched onto that and would have those cool discussions and be open to that sort of debate.
Sure. So looking back at this as a guardsman, and returning back to the state of Maine, what are you taking back from this experience to bring back to your own force and to kind of shape your experience when you go back to the engineer unit that you come from?
Yeah, going back to the operational force. Yeah, that's a great question, and someone I've been kind of chewing on for a while. I mean, one is the technical aspect, right? Being in the classroom taught me, it was a humbling tool. I had previously, I'd done one class at the University of Maine ROTC, a military history class, which was primarily lecture-based. So I'd stand up there and those poor cadets had to listen to me drone on, and a bunch of it was remote because it was when COVID hit. West Point doesn't teach that way. West Point teaches through what's called the Thayer method, and the Thayer method is really what we would just call class discussion. So everyone is supposed to do the reading. We hope that they do. If not, we have several ways of getting people to talk, not through coercion, but through mainly debates and various gamesmanship ways of convincing people that they're actually having fun. What those discussions give is it's a give and take of ideas, and they're not ones that I would normally have had. I might go into class and be like, all right, I think here's what I want to talk about, but something might come up and we just completely take a left turn and like head off talking about something entirely different. But that's okay, because that's sort of, as long as it's fitting within the course goals and it's helping them become a leader of character, which is what the goal of the history department and a West Point education is, then that's great. And those are the kind of awesome discussions, often the ones that leave you feel like kind of unsettled afterwards. Like after we finished Vietnam, everyone's like, I don't know how to think about this. And I'm like, I don't either. That's probably good though, because, it's kind of it's a big topic in American history. So learning a lot of those different educational techniques will definitely help me in my role as a state historian, also as a staff ride facilitator as well. And I also got really lucky to go on a lot of staff rides at West Point, taking the cadets to places such as, let's see, for spring break, we did the road to Gettysburg. So a whole week doing Fredericksburg, Chancellorsville, battles in between leading up to Gettysburg, and then 3 days at Gettysburg. We did Operation Market Garden this past spring, going to the Netherlands. And then I did a number of local staff rides and tours around West Point. All of that is additional information that I can bring back to the state to show, hey, look, here's how this is feasible. Here's different ways of doing things we might not have thought of before. Might be a little bit more economically feasible for some of them. And then I think also the other thing, just bringing back towards the operational force, is that idea of, what does it mean to be a leader of character? If I've just spent a year at West Point talking about leaders of character, like what does that mean from an ethical perspective? What is our duty, our obligation as officers? So it was really kind of a gut check, to be able to, after just, kind of the slog of, being an M-Day soldier, of just like, oh my God, I've just invested so much time as an XO, or I've just spent so much time on staff and everything you do seems repetitive and monotonous. And kind of a lot of times you're just being like, I don't know why I'm doing this anymore. And you're just exhausted, right? Especially in a senior leadership position, whether it's a platoon sergeant, first sergeant, company commander, that's exhausting. That takes a lot out of you if you are really committed. And this was a really good refresher on what it means to be in our profession, to be an officer, to be a soldier in the U.S. Army. And I think it's given me time to be able to reflect a little bit more on that and be recharged and able to bring that back to my role, whatever it is in our engineer battalion.
Outstanding. Yeah, it seems like Maine Army National Guard is going to gain a lot out of this experience on the M-Day side as well.
That's what I'm really hoping. And I'm hoping that through this partnership with National Guard Bureau, Center of Military History, the U.S. Military Academy, and then that state, whenever we get Guard officers going through here, I hope they're able to see this symbiotic relationship where cadets are going to gain a different perspective, a totally different perspective from really the other instructors, so they'll see. The state is going to gain somebody coming back with a lot more institutional knowledge now. If they don't have a trained command historian, hey, this is a great way to get a trained command historian to step into that role. National Guard Bureau gets to have a guardsman at West Point. That is so cool. You can have a person in those rooms, in those discussions, who does the, hey, what about the Guard? All those things that we've always wanted to do when you're like, man, does West Point or do these organizations ever think about the Guard? Similarly, at the Army Center of Military History, being able to provide that perspective to say, hey, remember, there is this whole other compo out there with all of this history, and how do we reach those soldiers? How do we help them develop? How do we meet their needs? And then also with CMH, being able to bring in that additional knowledge to provide background on a lot of the institutional history that the Army is developing. So really it is just this sort of full package that I think really benefits everybody involved.
So done with your time at West Point, now you're PCS down here to the DC area and you're assigned to Fort McNair. What are you doing at the Center of Military History and what does that entail?
Yeah, it's a very different change of pace. West Point, you are driven by the schedule, and the schedule is hectic. I was teaching 4 sections per semester, so you're almost always grading, developing course plans, grading some more, doing office hours with students, going to meetings. There's a whole bunch of additional duties that fall on. It's the Army, of course. Everything has an additional duty. If it doesn't have an additional duty, then is it even happening in the Army? So you just go, go, go. And then, of course, I was only there for a year. So I was like, all right, I want the full West Point experience. Like, I will go to football games. I will go to graduation. I will sign up for every single trip section to go absolutely anywhere that I possibly can. And so, it was sort of a choose your own adventure. And I was just like, I will choose all the adventures. So I was busy. And then it was definitely not a 9 to 5 because, on the weekends you're grading, you're developing lesson plans, you're emailing with students, going back and forth about their assignments or just their stuff that's going on in their everyday lives, doing mentorship and development. Transitioning to CMH was kind of a shock because it is returning sort of to my roots as a historian, which is research and towards publications. So the great thing is that Center of Military History realizes, hey, we have a Guard asset here. Let's leverage this for some Guard stuff. So the different things I work on at CMH primarily are different projects the CMH has going on surrounding the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. We're also looking at some history of defense support to civil authorities. And so all of that bringing in that specific unique Guard voice to be able to tell that side of the story. So it is a very different pace. It requires me to be a little bit more disciplined with my time, really focused. But it also does have me returning to the research aspect, which I really love, and then networking with the folks at CMH. And occasionally taking part in staff rides. So going to Normandy with yourself on the Maryland Army National Guard was amazing. Got some more coming up with their military history and some other organizations coming up. So still doing some of the traditional stuff, but really getting down into that research hole, so to speak.
That's outstanding. So it sounds like you're going to have a pretty tremendous impact there and making sure the Guard story is captured. And making sure that as we shape the events of the 250th, the Guard has a piece to remember, our part in the founding of the nation. It's outstanding.
Yeah, absolutely, and then also learning. It's a great organization to be able to soak up so much from so many different people and so many different experts. And so I think as a result of these combined 2 years, I can't even. The number of people who have had an impact upon me personally and in how I see myself, both as a historian and as an officer and as a guardsman, I would say that my perspective is so much more rich and full going back to the state after this.
Great. So Captain Bratton, if you could go back 10 years in your career and give yourself a piece of advice, what would that be?
All right, we're just going out with all the heavy questions today. All right. I think it's the stuff that you don't notice that has the biggest impact on your career. And I don't know that I would go back and give myself any different advice. I think I would, if I were to give myself advice, it would be to continue doing the things you're already doing, even though they seem like they're not working at the moment. So continue having a passion for the things you do, but also put yourself around people who are going to allow you to have the chance to succeed. I think we make such a big deal in the military about like, oh, we're a meritocracy, we rise up on our own merits. We all know that is a very limited way of looking at how the military does talent development, really. I have gotten to where I am not specifically because of my own talents, but also because mainly people in positions of authority or with positions to make a change gave me the opportunity or put me in a position to, sink or swim on my own merits by throwing me. I mean, it began pretty much as a second lieutenant where we had an event where representatives from all the battalions in the state had to give a brief historical, I think it had to be 1 minute, a historical summary of our battalion's history. at this big social function in front of the Adjutant General. And I was chosen as a representative of the 133rd Engineer Battalion with the added caveat, you may not talk about the 20th Maine. So I've researched something obscure. I talked about that for 1 minute. The tag noticed. And 2.5 years later, when he opened the command historian position, he knew my name, and that helped me get that job. I only got into that position because people knew what I was passionate about and that I cared and said, hey, Bratton's the guy to do this thing. So what could have been just a throwaway, I'm not going to take this seriously. If you are passionate about something, it will show, people will notice, and then you will be able to show off that talent. And then when you are in a position where we are now, sort of having a little bit of influence, do that to others, raise them up, put them in the limelight, and give them that opportunity to shine.
Yeah, that's a great bit of advice for young soldiers. So if you're interested in the talent development program or getting the opportunity to have an experience like Captain Bratton's, reach out to Army National Guard Leader Development and learn how you can apply for a program like his or one of your own design. Captain Bratton, thanks for coming out and joining us again today and sharing your experiences in the talent development program. And we look forward to seeing what more you do with the Maine Army National Guard.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on.
If you liked today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. You can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.